The engines of the little railway are always kept busy. They liked being kept busy. They huffed and puffed, whistling to each other as they passed by. They even loved to whistle hello to the standard gauge engines as they passed the wharf. One afternoon, Skarloey, Duncan, and Freddie were at the transfer yards. Skarloey's wheels were worn out. Duncan was confined in the sheds, and fearless Freddie's driver had taken ill. Time had passed, and the little engines were beginning to grow bored. "We ain't never catch a break like this on my old line," complained Freddie. "And I never complain anyway," said Duncan, agreeing with Freddie. "But I just wish I could get my wheels moving for once." Then Skarloey had an idea. "You know," he said, "instead of whining about what to do, why don't we talk about what had happened in our lives?" Duncan and Freddie blinked. They've never been asked such a question before, especially coming out of Skarloey. At last, Duncan spoke up. "You know," he wished, "Mr. Percival has confined me to the shed, but I haven't really gone into an explanation." "I've got time," said an eager Freddie. As Skarloey agreed, Duncan took a deep breath and began the story. "I was once again in trouble with the thin controller. I've accidentally pressed some coaches onto a damaged siding, and boy was he cross. But thankfully, no one was hurt. But he sent me to my sheds. I was on my way to the sheds, thinking about what I've done that week, when suddenly I came to a sudden stop. The bridge had been damaged and had collapsed during that night's storm. Then all of a sudden, I heard Rusty. 'Oh no!' I shouted. 'Rusty's coming down the other side!' And sure enough, he was. If he didn't stop soon, he would fall down the bridge. Then an idea flew into my funnel. I whistled as loudly as I could. Rusty heard this and stopped just in time. Luckily, no one had been hurt. 'Duncan,' cried Rusty, 'is that you?' I only blushed. 'Oh, yes, and I'm glad you're all right.' And I explained the whole situation about the bridge. Rusty only smiled. 'Oh, thank you, Duncan,' he said. 'I don't know what we'd have done if you hadn't shown up.' 'Ah, thanks,' I said, but I really hoped the thin controller would forgive me. 'So even though I've saved the day, Mr. Percival still confined me here,' complained Duncan. 'And it's not fair.' 'Well, the important thing is no one got hurt or seriously damaged,' sympathized Scarloey. 'Tch,' laughed Freddie. 'You feller might be brave, but wait till you hear this out loud.' And so Freddie began his story. 'The other day, fellers, I'd be taking some coal to the wharf for them fellers to warm up. And it'd be pretty peaceful round these mountains, when I hear a shrill whistle. I looked up ahead and saw there Rheneas was speeding out of control. His brakes were disconnected and he couldn't stop. Help! I was so scared, but I knew the line so well. There was a junction up ahead, so I took that chance to jump the switch before Rheneas had smashed right into us. But the trouble wasn't over yet. He was heading toward the end of the line. I was uncoupled and gave chase. The line was so long that my joints ached, but I still had good enough steam left in me. And it did take a while to catch up with Rheneas. But then drivers saw him from cab away. I was switched onto the other side of the track, where I overtook Rheneas in order to get ahead of him, in order to couple up in front. Gotcha, I shouted. Then I braked as hard as I could. The end of the station was near, but I braked and braked and braked until we finally stopped. Luckily, no one had been hurt. Oh, thank you, Freddie, sighed Rheneas. You are one brave engine. Ah, don't swear, young feller, I chuckled. What are you doing coming in such a hurry? Well, began Rheneas, there was a birthday train that needed to come through here. But these trucks, of course, were very silly indeed. Oh, thank you, Freddie. And that is why they call me Fearless Freddie of all names. Skarloey and Duncan were impressed. How on earth did you manage to keep pushing yourself no matter how hurt you were? Asked Duncan. Fearless Freddie never gives up, chanted Freddie, no matter what happens. Just then, Rusty arrived at the transfer yards. He was pushing what looked like an old wooden coach. Thanks, Rusty. That horn was such lovely for... She trailed off when she saw Skarloey. Scarloey, she cried. Is that really you? Raven, exclaimed Scarloey. It's been a long time. Freddie, Duncan, and Rusty were surprised. Do you two know each other? Asked Rusty. Yes, indeed, replied Raven. Scarloey was the bravest engine on my line when I used to work with him. Ah, yes, the good old days, sighed Scarloey. When were you ever so brave? Asked Duncan. Well, said Scarloey, it took me a while, but it goes back to way before I was first built on this railway. And he began his story as the others listened with interest. Back in those days, we used to work well together as a pair. She used to carry around workmen to help repair the line, and I'd be the engine who would take them. Oh, those times when the line was quiet back then. We usually stopped at sidings to help check the switches and the signals, of course. And when they've gone for their tea break, we stopped to tell our stories along the line. She chuckled. From the sound of it, you almost sounded like you were scared that time. All because those scallywags cut corners with my funnel, I said. But now I am more sensible nowadays. More sensible than Gordon, chuckled Raven. Oh, true, I chuckled. Soon the workmen were done, and it was time to head home. Can't wait to rest my weary wheels, I said to Raven. Me too, I said. This is peaceful, I said to Raven. And she could only agree. We were just rounding a corner when all of a sudden, crack! A large hole had cracked along the tracks, and Raven started to tilt. Help! She cried. I was so startled I didn't know what to do. Then I struck to reality. I dug my wheels into the soil and pulled as hard as I could. But we were being dragged further and further to the ground. But I kept on straining, and straining until finally Raven was out, safe and sound. The workmen were so surprised they nearly dropped their tools. Oh, oh, thank you, Skarloey, panted Raven. We mustn't leave others behind, Scarloey said kindly. Now, let's find another route. And they puffed further on the line. At the sheds, Raven spoke to me. You were so brave, Skarloey. I never even know if we would have made it out of that hole in time. Ah, don't sweat it, I assured. Couldn't let your wheels fly out of you, couldn't I? No indeed, Skarloey, said the Thing Controller. You are very brave little engine. And a really useful one too, of course. Agree to agree, chanted Raven. Waltzers, gasped Duncan. That was really brave of you, Skarloey. Even more as brave as me, agreed Freddie. Ah, don't sweat it, said Scarloey. We all had our adventures, and we showed what true bravery within ourselves. And I still won't forget that rescue of yours, Duncan, chuckled Rusty. The others just laughed in agreement.